Dickie Dredd, The New Age Travellers, A History, 1960 to 1990. Chapter 3, The Convoy Starts to Form. The Greenham Common Protest. In 1981, a group of women walked from Cardiff to Greenham Common, protesting the arrival of American cruise missiles at the air bases. But when they got there, they stayed. The women's peace camp at Greenham wasn't just a protest site, it became a radical living experiment in resistance. At its height, it has multiple gates, each with its own group: yellow, blue, orange, violet, each named after a rainbow colour. Women lived in tents, benders, old ambulances. They cooked communally, held consensus meetings, danced naked on silos. The decision to make Greenham Common a women-only protest wasn't an accident or a quirk. It was a radical stance rooted in both feminist politics and practical protest strategy. The organisers believed that nuclear weapons and militarism were inseparable from patriarchy, a global system built on domination, violence and control. By excluding men, they created a space where women could confront that system on their own terms without being overshadowed, spoken over or redirected by male leadership. It was also tactical. At the time when police and media were quick to portray all protests as dangerous or violent, a women-only camp disrupted that narrative. It challenged stereotypes. It forced the public and press to reckon with images of mothers, grannies, midwives and students chaining themselves to fences or dancing on missile silos. This wasn't Woodstock, this was non-violent direct action with teeth. There were debates and tensions. Not all women agreed with excluding men, and not all women felt included, but the camp structure, non-hierarchical organisation and feminist grounding became an enduring example of radical gendered resistance. Yet it helped shape how many future protests, including parts of the peace convoy, thought about leadership, care and collective power. Not everyone cheered the women at Greenham. While some saw courage and conviction, others saw nuisance or worse. Tabloid headlines mocked them as unwashed lesbians, cranks in cardigans and mad mums on the warpath. Politicians called them irresponsible or hysterical. Locals sometimes threw abuse and even eggs or dog mess at the camp. The sight of women camping rough, shouting back, refusing to move, unsettled Britain, still steeped in deference and gender roles. But the ridicule backfired. The more they were mocked, the more visible they became, the more people turned up to join them. In time, Greenham rewired the idea of the protest could look like. Not polished, not polite, but persistent, embodied and deeply human. They faced brutal winter, evictions, beatings. They kept coming. Some came for weeks, others stayed for years. Anecdotes abound, from women chaining themselves to the fences with their children in tow, to the time they wove massive webs of wool across the gates, symbolising life, connection, resistance. One Christmas they lit candles and sung lullabies while American guards stood baffled behind razor wire. Many of the young women and allies from Greenham later moved into buses and joined the first waves of the peace convoy. They brought with them a deep knowledge of direct action, non-hierarchical organising, media savvy and spiritual fire. Greenham wasn't just an event, it was a training ground for defiance, and it lit the fuse for mobile resistance to come. By the mid-1980s, Greenham Common's Women Peace Camp had become one of the most longest-running protest occupations in modern British history. But time, weather and relentless pressure took their toll. The American cruise missiles were installed in 1983, despite massive blockades and global attention. Still, the women didn't leave. Over the next few years, Greenham splintered into smaller camps, each with its own character. Some focused on spiritual protests, others on direct action. Women chained themselves to fences, locked arms under trucks, painted slogans on guard huts, and continued to live in tents and makeshift shelters through rain, snow and police raids. The authorities responded with growing force. Evictions became more organised and more violent. Bailiffs tore down benders. Police arrested women for obstruction, trespass or simply being there. Councils passed bylaws to outlaw camping on common land. Yet the camp survived, rebuilt and returned. But change was coming. In 1987, following arms reduction agreements between the US and USSR, the first missiles were removed. By 1991, the last cruise missile was gone. The Cold War was cooling, and with it, political relevance of the base. Without its central target, the camp slowly dissolved. Some women stayed until the very end, symbolically guarding the land until the fences came down. In 2000, the last perimeter fence was removed. In 2002, a commemorative peace garden was opened. The land returned to public use. But the spirit of Greenham didn't vanish, it scattered. Many of the women, seasoned in resistance, hardened by years of confrontation and consensus, didn't head home, they hit the road. They joined other radicals, punks and road kids, forming convoys, building new communities not tied to one place. What Greenham had tested, non-hierarchical living, autonomous space, refusal of state control, became the blueprint of what came next. The fences came down at Greenham, but but the will to live free, move freely and challenge power was already rolling towards Stonehenge. Media and art. The public response to travellers, anarcho-punks, squatter collectors and peace camps of the 1970s and 1980s was a cocktail of curiosity, contempt, admiration and fear. For many in mainstream Britain, these scenes weren't just unfamiliar, they were alien, threatening, even grotesque. The idea that people could choose to live in buses, squat buildings or camp out for years on military land didn't fit into the dominant logic of mortgage, career, order. Tabloid media leaned in hard. Travellers were branded as work-shy scroungers, filthy dropouts or worse. Anarcho-punks were portrayed as violent nihilists, and the Greenham women as hysterical, unkempt nuisances. Television coverage was zooming on muddy feet, dogs on ropes, litter near camps, reinforcing the image of chaos and decay. Headlines like "Scum on Wheels" or "Army of the Unwashed" weren't uncommon. But for every attack, there are also moments of connection. Some local communities, particularly in rural Wales, Devon and Scotland, developed solid relationships with nearby traveller or land-based groups. Farm shops began selling to bus crews. Locals showed up with wood or asked for herbal advice. Some landlords quietly allowed winter stays. In certain cases, town councils even negotiated access to land and water points. In the arts and underground press, International Times, Anarchy magazine, Zigzag and dozens of anarcho-zines, these groups were celebrated as visionaries, resistors, frontline utopians. Long-form interviews with Crass, photograph of Teepee Valley Gardens, festival roadmaps helped knit a counter-public that challenged the state's narrative. Still, mainstream Britain largely kept its distance. The sight of convoys pulling into towns could provoke panic. Squats were raided. Women's peace groups were surveyed. Living differently was increasingly portrayed not just as eccentric but as dangerous. It was a cultural standoff between a society built on control and a culture learning how to live without it. By the early 1980s, the lines had been drawn. The travellers were no longer just a curiosity. They were becoming a problem to be managed, and that made confrontation almost inevitable. The term rainbow warriors had made its way back from American counterculture into the heart of the UK traveller and free festival scene. Inspired by the legend, often misattributed to Cree or Hopi prophecy, that the foretold of a time when people of all colours and backgrounds would rise to defend the earth, the rainbow warrior archetype became symbolic shorthand for peaceful resistance, earth-based living and spiritual rebellion. In squats, communes and painting buses across Britain, Rainbow Warrior was more than a label. It was a badge of intent. It captured the spirit of those who gathered at Stonehenge, travelled to Teepee Valley or set up healing circles at Windsor and Deeply Vale. These were not warriors of violence but of defiance, armed with guitars, herbal tinctures and flyers scrawled with peace symbols and unity charts. Many drew influence from rainbow gatherings in the US, adopting similar open circle decision making, food shares and spiritual outlooks rooted in nature and community. The influence of Greenpeace's Rainbow Warriorship, bombed in 1985 by French intelligence agents, only deepened the resonance. The incident radicalised many in the alternative scene, reinforcing the idea that peaceful resistance was dangerous to the powers that be. To be a Rainbow Warrior was to be a dreamer under siege. Long before blogs, forums or social media, the traveller movement told its own story. In hand-folded zines, smudged photocopies, spray-painted slogans, cassette tapes and stitched-together scrapbooks. These weren't polished or professional, but that was the point. DIY publishing was rebellion. It was how you got the word out, challenged lies in the press, and let people know where the next festival might or might not happen. By the late 1980s, the phrase could be found daubed across trucks and trailers, echoed in chants at road protests, and worn on badges by the barefoot and wind-battered. For some, it was cringe-worthy idealism. For others, it was a quiet manifesto: love the land, build no empire, travel light, stand firm. Scenes like vague festival undercurrents and later schnews became unofficial bulletins of the road. Scrawled maps to lay up spots, herbal remedy lists, legal advice, rants about cops, poetry, lurid accounts of evictions, or joyful recountings of sight births and solstice parties. Sometimes they were anarchic to the point of unreadable, sometimes heartbreakingly precise. Visual art was everywhere, from buses, flyers, jackets, rigs, and placards. The aesthetic was stitched together with punk, Xerox, hippie swirl, cult symbols, bike patches, Celtic revivalism, and good old-fashioned filth. There was no brand guide. You used what you had: a spray can, Tipex, a biro, felt tip pen, and some paper found in a skip. This underground publishing culture helped bind the scene, a kind of pre-internet web of solidarity. Messages were passed by hand, by post, or by word of mouth. And though most of it was never achieved or preserved, archived or preserved, fragments still surface in attics, shoebox, and digital scans. They remain a raw, real record of a movement that refused to be edited.